Okay, I had a regular that sent me a picture on the old video that I made here, I don't know, 8 months ago or so now, about Serapis. And he sent me, "What's up with this?" And it's a picture of Zeus done in this way, and wanted to know what's up about that. And I actually started to type back an answer. And then it got to the point of I just read back whatever I had written, and I'm like, I'm not going to get anywhere. And I could write more than what's written over here on the right and probably still not get anywhere. And so I figured I would just do this. So I decided to take his picture, which is shitty, pardon me, and find a better picture of it if I could. And I found another effigy that's actually different, but the same thing, of Zeus. And in doing so, there was about 12, 20 of them here whenever I look it up. And so I saw this one, and I chose it because I think it gives a good example of being able to show it from the other side, because that side that we were talking about is easy to see, kind of, and how things blend. Because understand that the guy on the right, I'm fixing to explain all this picture to you, what you're looking at, but notice how the guy on the right has got a modus on his head, and that is a measure of grain, basically, and it's known to be with Ceres, which is where we get cereal and things from, or Demeter, and goddesses of grain have this onto them. Tanit is seen with it sometimes, and so on, right? And why is that, if the same depiction that we were just looking at that you sent me is Zeus? And how are they comparing the two and doing whatever? Well, there's really, I guess, cut through it all here real quick, there's no real storm god in the Egyptians. Well, it kind of is. They consider it to be Typhon, Set, doing something, or a god of chaos at work. In fact, at about this time, there's some type of temple inscription that says something about how it rained 3 times this year, and they wondered if something's wrong. I don't know if it's at the end of the year, December 31st, and wow, it rained 3 times this year, or it's just May or June, and they're like, it already rained 3 times this year. What's up with that? But they don't rely on the rains that come there. They rely on some rain that comes in the area of Ethiopian highlands, and the snow that gets accumulated there and then falls down, and then other rivers that are leading into the major lakes that are back there in Victoria, and that's where the starting of the Nile is, Dr. Livingston, I presume, and all that. And it comes in and meets the blue and the white Nile and comes on through here now. Well, they've now put a dam in there and they control it, and it doesn't have big burps anymore, right? But in that same aspect, they didn't really have a storm god that would work in an aspect of bringing the fields and bringing the crops and doing that type of thing. But this serves that same purpose. Okay? I'm going to start reading what it says over here, and then we'll go off into more of it, and just keep checking out what you can see in this picture and what you think of it. But he's got that modus on his head, but then he also, in his tail grasp in it, which looks like a feather somewhat, is actually a sheath of wheat. And she has a torch, and she's the light bearer. And that's Isis. Their counterpart that you're real familiar with in a Romanized way is Venus. And Venus is the bright and morning star and the light bringer. And that thing that's in the middle there is a canoptic jar, symbolizing the idea of Osiris and rebirth. So this probably has a lot to do with somebody's funerary rites. And they tell you that this is a somewhat unique example of the gods Isis, Serapis, and Osiris Canopus as serpents sitting within a conch shell at the bottom. The Romanicizing Isis has stylized curls and defined breasts, and she's got curled more hair and then separate braids growing into it, and defined breasts, but she looks like a cobra too. And if we look at this, and I said something like a Medusa, you'd get the idea. And these things are, of course, Naga type serpents, like the serpent out of the Bible. No, it's different than Apep, but they are being the serpent, wise as serpents, right? And she wears a bovine crown with horns, a sun disk, and then the two plumes that are there, and holds a torch, while Serapis dons a long beard and curled coiffure of his hair. And if you look right at the very top right here, it almost looks like he has a snake coming out, Uraeus, coming out of his forehead a little bit, or maybe he's just got a curl like Superman. Hey. And so he wears his signature modius on top and holds a shaft of wheat. Osiris Canopus wears a nemez and ram horns, which his little ram horns here are very much more like Canom. And with a sun disk and plumes, his conical canopic body is carved with a scarab and a pendant with the Apis bull and two falcons. Now, so what, it's real small here, but that's the scarab right here. Here's the Apis bull, the sun disk, and a falcon and a falcon. I think it shows up on here. It's a decent picture. Much better than the first one, and also this goes more into it and more in depth. But we also have two snakes coming together. And while it may be a king snake, oh snap, and a cobra, it's two snakes coming together. And the aspect of both is stronger than the singular. In fact, Serapis, this guy here, is Osar, that's Osiris's real name before he got all, got all Scottish and Irish and decided to go with Osiris, O'Leary. So Osar Apis, and so it's like the Apis bull. And this effectively is like a Jesus character, right? And if you think about the situation here with Osiris in there and everything, in the ancient tale of Osiris, and then Isis having put him back together and just couldn't find his ding-ding because a fish ate it, well, so they made it out of gold, and she humped him and ended up having a baby, which was effectively Horus in a form of this, which is another version of Osiris, which they kept rolling through at every single regeneration of each person in the Book of the Dead, coming forth by day, but at the same time, they represent the Apis bull, or it represents them in some way too. It's that challenge that's there. So that kind of goes together. Hopefully you can see that some more. So Osiris Canopus wears that Nemes and ram's horns. His conical canopic body is carved with a scarab and a pendant with the Apis bull and two falcons. Not all snakes were chaotic beings with nefarious intentions like Apep. That's the snake that has to be killed by Seth at night. By the way, a lot of people don't understand that why he would be there and why this goes on if he killed Osiris and he did these things. Certain things had to happen, and they just put it into the tale and went with it. They had Seti and all these people that were of Seth. It wasn't like he was looked at as being the devil, but he was somebody who actually could kill Apep. In fact, Apep, the snake, would hypnotize people if they didn't watch it, and he was the only one that could do it. Right? Much like Medusa turned to stone, catch you in her gaze, this type situation. Right? And so it had to be him. And in some strange way, that's kind of very much like the second rolling through of Sumerians, where he ends up getting picked to try to end up avenging the gods and has to fight Tiamat. And he says the only way he'll do it is that if they make him the king of the gods afterwards. Therefore, his way of attaining kingship in some ways, right? Gives him that divine light to rule. In fact, they all agreed to it. It's written right there, right? So that just settles it. So he ends up having to fight the Tiamat serpent and go through the ideal. Very much like Medusa had to be taken out and so on, but is he fixing to kill her? No. It doesn't work that way with this people here. It's a little different. Everyone's got a little different flavor when they make that stew. And the flavor here is that they're reborn out of this egg here in the canoptic jars and the coming forth by day. And they're sitting in a conch shell, so it's got to do with the ocean. And you say, well, what? No, because it's a freshwater river, right? The Nile. Why has it got an ocean? Well, in their belief, and it shows up in the Bible too, by the way, it's an incorrect thing also, but in their belief, the Milky Way was an ocean of stars that they could go through, and they could sail through it like it was a sea. And so they talk about it being the sea of stars and the Milky Way, much like the Nile. And you look at the Nile at nighttime and see lights all down it and stuff, or down certain parts of it, and it gives you that kind of glistening effect, as above, so below. So they had this dream ideal that they would go through that. Well, in your Bible interpretation, they said that heaven was full of water and that God opened up the floodgates. He let open vents that he had, like the skylights, and let it in, and water came in out of heaven, and there's not water there. It's one way I used to debunk the Bible on how its beliefs were, but of course, a lot of these paganish beliefs about what the cosmos was made of is a little off. But it's also amazing to find out how on they really, really were on certain things, especially the Sumerians that nobody pays any attention to. They seem to be overshadowed by Egypt enough, and Egypt is all steeped in this theology type thing and all that. And they've got some great works. But at the same time, when you look at the Sumerians, how they popped up out like a popcorn, it looks like they really helped herald Egypt in its first place. And then it shows you a good connection for all of it. So anyhow, there's a picture of Zeus, and I'll try to come out of it and see if I can go back there. And I couldn't find a better picture of your exact one, but there's this one that's just twinsy to it that's not as rubbed out and in better shape or focus, and higher pixel picture. But it really looks like this, and it stood up like a snake, right? And so this goes back to Marduk and the thing that I was talking about there, but it also goes back to Gilgamesh. And the idea that these snakes, much like a phoenix, shed their skin and become brand new. And so whenever it shows you this representation here, it's supposed to have meant longevity and being able to keep going, and in some way think of it as a strange way of saying cat has 9 lives, give it to me. They're not doing that with cats, though. That's not the thing like we talk about cats. That's a mythology. Yeah, and we still have that idea. But I've seen my cat, one of my cats I know has gone through 8 of them. Anyhow, so not all snakes were bad and everything. A lot of them are protectors. They keep Uranus on their foreheads, all this type of stuff. Take the Greek god Asclepius and his daughter Hygienia, or the Roman gods of fountains like Juturna or Fontus, and Juturna would be Ioturna, and it has to do with Saturn. But these gods are related to sanitation and rejuvenation through purification or medicinal practices, and are typically depicted with either their embracing a snake or emblazoned with one on their scepters. And Asclepius shows this scepter that looks like the Caduceus, and it's got a snake wrapped around it with a stick. And I tell you, I'm surrounded by this stuff. I told you recently of a story where I had this water moccasin on a stick whenever I was a kid, and brought it home to my dad, and he freaked out on me and killed it in front of me, knocked me down because it was poisonous. And my dad did not like snakes whatsoever. And then he pried its mouth open, showed me it was a cottonmouth, said that if I got bit down there, I may not have been able to explain to me what happened whenever I got back to him. So then he wanted to show me books about snakes. When he found it, he willied out just looking at the picture on books on snakes. And I've seen him before be on his chair, you know, watching things in a commercial come on with a snake. There used to be this one with National Geographic, and it came on and it showed a snake kind of leering out, ready to strike. And it was just little 1 second clips of this, and he'd come to it, and whoa, you know, and you could actually see him somewhat react. He'd be like, la, 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 oh, you know, it'd definitely wake him up. My dad really wasn't scared of anything except for, it seems, snakes. But that's another tale altogether, I guess. And so there's purification or medicine we still use today with the Caduceus. So things come from ancient times and still are held with this belief that snakes can help you. And we talked about them being on people's tattoos up their arms and things like that. That's supposed to help you out and do all these things. And boy, weren't the Egyptians steeped in it. And they're using animism and concepts that you can see echoed in the Sumerians and all over the place. In fact, the snake of Yorgamander and so on, that all that all comes from the same root from long, long ago. But I've showed that in other videos, and it continue to show that in more and more pieces. So they show them on their scepters and Caduceus, and then this is due to the snake's habit of shedding their skin and becoming anew, much like the phoenix, as I just said. And from the ashes or abundant crop, the dead shaft, as with the Egyptian cobra goddess of the harvest, Renenetet. And this is the ideal that you can chop off. I don't know if you've ever had any of those bushes out in front of your house, but you can chop that damn bush off, literally, and it'll grow new pieces out of it. There's stuff that they want you to put on it to kill it off, and you can take a screwdriver or a drill and drill holes and pour this stuff in there, and it gets down to the roots and kill it. You really need to rip the roots out of there. And in fact, you need to do that if you're going to turn it back into a garden anyhow. But that's another thing. So kind of like the phoenix. And then we talked about a cobra goddess of the harvest. And so you can see that she's kind of emulating that on the left, and he's doing that in the symbology of the Egyptians with the Roman god male counterpart situation. So what that kind of is. So explain this. Well, Zeus is a storm god, and when they're doing it, they're saying, well, he's the same guy, and you look at that, and that's the same guy. Well, who is that? Well, that's Serapis. And so Serapis is taking the place of this in this pantheon that rolls around through time, and he's like a Jesus type character. Yeah, way, way long before it. Anyhow, other examples include the Urea goddess, Nekbet, so the Urea on the forehead, right? And Wajet, shown on the brows of the pharaoh, along with Sun Disk, or the patron goddess Meretzker of Deir el-Medina. Not to be confused with Funky Coal Medina, but each refer to the snake's ability to be both threatening and protective. Limestone Greco-Roman period canopus, so like a canoptic type jar. And if you look at it, the canoptic type jar here really looks like an egg. In fact, much like the top of his modus, and it has that ringlet on too. There is a ringlet like that holding it up. Like you can't get an egg to stand up, but you can get a little ring like that and you can get it to stand up. But that's also considered to be a canoptic jar, and that's one of the ones that they put the organs in whenever they mummify the dead kings. So hopefully this goes much deeper than we would have gone in that original tale of that. But oh yeah, I was going to show you where he was maybe in the Greek thing. Now it's already closed because I found this in a Facebook thing that I had to get into of this guy. So hey, I got on Facebook. I'm liable to look around and try to find some people real quick. I don't ever get on. It's been 2 years probably. Anyhow, like, share, subscribe, and enjoy. But we can see here now this Holy Trinity situation that's going on too. The same person in this rebirth, God and Goddess, and she's the one that made it happen to form a third person. But in this version, it's the god of grain, and so in the rain and the goddess of grain and rebirth, and it all works together, and the river, it comes up and makes it all work around and around and around, and two snakes coming together keeps the fertility of the land working. Yeah. And so she's a viper, but he's a constrictor, and so he can wrap himself around that egg and pop the top and form rebirth. But there's this same statue. It looks just like this, except for it's got the body all below it. Instead of this snake coming out here like this, it's all wrapped around his body and his legs, huh? So what's the difference? Really, there is no difference. Except for maybe he's taking on the aspect of the snake. Be the snake. But that's pretty much it. But if you want to see something like, hey, here's Medusa in Egypt, and here's ancient Naga serpents, and all the way in Egypt, not in India and the Orient, and here's this and here's that, and how they all have it. Is it all exactly the same? Not exactly, but quite often it fits the same mode in the same place, and it's the same song. Listen to it. It's the same song. Like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy, and we'll get on to this. I know there's something I left out. If I remember, I'll put it in the comments down below. Peace.